Is this what you do with your life? Stand in traffic begging like a dog?
7 days, that's all it took. Chioma went from spitting on beggars to becoming one. From designer dresses to dirty rags. From a banana island mansion to sleeping on the streets of Ajagunle. And the woman who saved her life? The same woman Chioma had crushed with cruel words just 1 week earlier. This is the story of the fastest fall from grace Lagos has ever seen, and the slowest climb back to humanity. Chioma Uka 4 had never known what it felt like to want something she couldn't have. At 23 years old, she lived in a mansion in Banana Island that overlooked the Lagos Lagoon. Her closet was the size of most people's apartments, filled with dresses from Paris and shoes from Milan. Her Instagram had 2 million followers who watched her document a life of luxury that seemed more fantasy than reality. Her father, Chief Emeka Uka 4, owned half of Victoria Island and had enough money to buy the other half if he wanted to. But money, as Chioma would soon learn, can disappear faster than morning mist when the sun rises. The day everything changed started like any other day in Chioma's perfect life. She woke up in her king-sized bed, rolled over to check her phone, and scrolled through comments from people telling her how beautiful she was, how lucky she was, how they wished they could live her life. She smiled, took a selfie with her silk pillowcase and captioned it, "Another blessed morning in paradise." What she didn't know was that this would be her last morning in paradise. By sunset, the gates would close behind her forever. Chioma's driver, Sule, had been waiting for 30 minutes outside in the black Mercedes G-Wagon. He was used to waiting. Chioma was never on time. She believed that punctuality was for poor people who had to worry about other people's schedules. When she finally emerged from the mansion, she was wearing a white Gucci sundress that cost more than Sule earned in 6 months. Her sunglasses were Chanel. Her purse was Hermes. Her perfume announced her presence before she even stepped outside. "You're late, Sule," she said, sliding into the back seat. Sule said nothing. He had learned long ago that nothing he said mattered. He was furniture to people like Chioma. Useful furniture, but furniture nonetheless. They drove through the security gate, past the manicured gardens and the fountain that cost 3 million naira, out onto the streets of Lagos where the real world began. Chioma barely noticed the real world. She was on her phone, posting photos, responding to comments, curating a life that looked perfect from the outside because she refused to acknowledge anything on the outside that wasn't perfect. "Traffic is heavy today, madam," Sule said carefully. "There is an accident on Falomo Bridge." "Then find another route," Chioma snapped without looking up from her phone. "I have a spa appointment at 2. I cannot be late." Sule turned onto a side street, trying to navigate around the gridlock. The road grew narrower, the buildings grew older, the people on the streets grew poorer. This was not Chioma's Lagos. This was the Lagos of struggle and survival, of people who worked 12-hour days for wages that wouldn't buy one of her handbags. This was the Lagos she pretended didn't exist, and that's when she saw her. A woman maybe 40 years old, maybe younger. Poverty ages people in ways that luxury never reveals. She was standing by the roadside with a baby tied to her back and a wooden tray balanced on her head. The tray held oranges carefully arranged, each one representing hope that someone would buy, that today she could feed her children, that tomorrow would come with its own small mercies. The woman's wrapper was faded. Her feet were dusty. Her face carried the weight of 1,000 small disappointments. As the G-Wagon crawled through traffic, the woman approached, hope flickering in her eyes. She had seen the expensive car, had calculated that someone in such a vehicle might spare some change, might show some kindness, might remember what it felt like to need help. She tapped gently on the window. Chioma looked up from her phone, annoyed at the interruption. She saw the woman's face pressed near the tinted glass, saw the desperation, saw the baby's tiny head bobbing with each of the mother's movements, and Chioma laughed. Not a polite laugh, not a nervous laugh, but a cruel, mocking laugh that came from somewhere deep and ugly inside her soul. She rolled down the window just enough for her voice to carry. "Look at you," Chioma said, loud enough for others on the street to hear. "Is this what you do with your life? Stand in traffic begging like a dog? Maybe if you had worked harder in school, if you had ambition, if you had any sense at all, you wouldn't be out here looking so pathetic." The woman's face crumbled. Other people on the street turned to watch. Some looked away, uncomfortable. Others looked at Chioma with anger. But no one said anything. Rich people could say anything they wanted. That was the rule. "Please, madam," the woman said quietly, her voice shaking. "I am not begging. I am selling oranges. I work hard. You just want my money," Chioma interrupted. "Everyone wants my money. Well, I didn't get rich by giving it away to every lazy person who refuses to improve their situation. Sule, drive. I can't stand looking at this anymore." As the G-Wagon pulled away, Chioma was still laughing, still scrolling through her phone, already forgetting the woman whose dignity she had just shredded in public. But the woman didn't forget. She stood there in the street, tears running down her face, her baby starting to cry as if sensing her mother's pain. She looked up at the sky, and she did something that Chioma would never have expected. She prayed, not a prayer for revenge, not a prayer for justice, but a prayer that was older than any religion, deeper than any theology. A prayer that mothers have whispered since the beginning of time when their children are hungry and strangers are cruel. "God," she whispered, "let her understand. Let her know what this feels like. Let her walk in my shoes just long enough to remember that we are all human, that we all suffer, that your mercy is the only thing that separates us from destruction. Not our money, not our status, just your mercy." And God, as he sometimes does when the prayer is pure and the lesson is necessary, was listening. Chioma forgot about the woman by the time she reached the spa. She spent 3 hours being pampered, massage, facial, manicure, pedicure, emerging feeling refreshed and beautiful and utterly certain of her place in the world. Her phone rang as she was leaving. It was her father's lawyer, Mr. Adaiwale. "Chioma," he said, and something in his voice made her stomach tighten. "You need to come to the hospital. It's your father." The world tilted. "What happened?" Chioma's voice came out smaller than she expected. "He collapsed during a business meeting. Massive heart attack. The doctors are working on him now, but..." Mr. Adewale paused. "You should come quickly." Chioma ran to the car, her spa-relaxed state evaporating into pure panic. Sule drove through Lagos traffic like a man possessed, weaving between cars, ignoring horns and curses, getting her to Lagos University Teaching Hospital in record time. She burst through the emergency room doors, her Gucci dress incongruous among the suffering and the antiseptic smell and the harsh fluorescent lights. "Chief Okafor," she gasped to the nurse at the desk. "Where is he? I'm his daughter." The nurse's face told her everything before any words were spoken. "I'm so sorry," the nurse said gently. "The doctors did everything they could." Chioma's legs stopped working. She felt herself falling, felt hands catching her, felt the world breaking apart into pieces that would never fit back together the same way. Her father was dead, the man who had given her everything, who had protected her from every hardship, who had built an empire so his daughter would never know struggle. Gone in an instant, his heart giving out at 58 years old. All that money unable to buy him one more heartbeat. The funeral was huge. Half of Lagos elite came to pay their respects, though many came more to be seen than to mourn. Chioma stood at the graveside in a black designer dress, her face hidden behind dark sunglasses, numb to everything except the impossible reality that she was alone now. After the funeral, Mr. Adewale asked to speak with her privately. They sat in her father's study, her study now, surrounded by the trappings of success. Mr. Adewale looked uncomfortable, shifting papers on the massive desk. Chioma, he began carefully, we need to discuss your father's estate. Whatever paperwork needs to be signed, I'll sign it, Chioma said, barely paying attention. Just make sure everything transfers to me smoothly. I don't want complications. Mr. Adewale cleared his throat. That's what I need to tell you. There won't be a smooth transfer because... He paused, choosing his words carefully. There's nothing to transfer. Chioma looked up sharply. What do you mean, nothing? Your father was in severe financial trouble, Chioma. For the past 2 years, he's been borrowing heavily to maintain appearances, to keep the business afloat, to maintain your lifestyle. He took loans from very dangerous people. The banks have already begun seizing assets. The mansion, the cars, the business properties, it's all collateral for debts that far exceed their value. Chioma felt the room spinning. That's impossible. My father was rich. We have money. You have nothing, Mr. Adewale said, and his voice was kind but firm. I'm sorry, Chioma. Your father tried to protect you from this reality. He kept hoping he could turn things around. But the heart attack, he trailed off. The creditors are already moving. You have maybe a week before they take the house. Everything in it, including your personal belongings, is technically their property now. But what am I supposed to do? Chioma's voice was rising, panic replacing shock. Where am I supposed to go? Mr. Adewale looked at her with something that might have been pity. I don't know, Chioma, but I suggest you figure it out quickly. The people your father borrowed from are not patient, and they are not kind. 1 week later, Chioma stood on the street outside the mansion, the former mansion, watching as men in uniforms loaded furniture into trucks. Her clothes, her shoes, her jewelry, her entire life packed into boxes and driven away to be sold at auction. They let her keep one suitcase. 23 years of accumulation reduced to what she could carry in one bag. Sule had disappeared the day the creditors came. The household staff had scattered, looking for new positions with families who could still afford to pay them. Chioma's 2 million Instagram followers had no idea their idol was now homeless. She tried calling friends. The phones rang, but no one answered. Rich people have many friends, but poor people discover that those friendships evaporate like expensive perfume the moment the bottle breaks. Chioma spent the first night in a cheap hotel in Yaba, paying with the last cash she had in her purse. The room was tiny, with stained walls and a bed that smelled of other people's desperation. She lay awake all night, certain this was a nightmare she would wake up from. But morning came, and the nightmare continued. By the third day, her money was gone. The hotel manager told her to leave. She stood on the street with her suitcase, looking at a city that suddenly seemed impossibly large and impossibly hostile. She had no skills. She had never worked a day in her life. Her university degree in business administration was from a school where her father's donations mattered more than her grades. She had no references, no experience, no network that wasn't built entirely on her father's money. Chioma tried to sell her designer clothes, but the second-hand shops offered insulting amounts. Her Gucci dress fetched 3,000 naira. Her Chanel sunglasses, 2,000. Her Hermes bag, which had cost 2 million, sold for 10,000 because the shop owner knew desperation when he saw it. The money lasted 2 more days, and then Chioma learned what it felt like to be hungry. Not the kind of hunger that means you're slightly peckish and thinking about lunch, but the kind of hunger that gnaws at your stomach like a living thing. that makes you weak and dizzy, that occupies your every thought until food becomes the only thing that matters in the entire world. She stood outside a restaurant in Surulere, watching people eat through the window, her mouth watering at smells that had never meant anything to her before. A security guard approached her. "Madam, you cannot stand here. You are disturbing the customers." "I'm not doing anything," Chioma protested weakly. "I know what you are doing. Move along. Go find somewhere else." Somewhere else. But where was somewhere else when everywhere was nowhere? Chioma walked. She walked until her feet hurt, until her designer shoes, the one pair she had kept, gave her blisters, until the Lego's heat beat down on her unconditioned skin and sweat soaked through her clothes. She found herself in a market. Not the fancy boutiques of Victoria Island, but a real market where real people bought real food with money they had earned through real work. The smells overwhelmed her. Roasting corn, frying akara, fresh bread. Her stomach cramped with hunger so intense it felt like violence. That's when she saw the woman. The same woman from the traffic. The woman with the baby and the oranges. The woman Chioma had mocked 1 week and a lifetime ago. The woman was sitting on a low wooden stool, her oranges arranged on a tray before her, calling out prices in a tired voice that had called out the same prices 1,000 times before. Chioma wanted to run, wanted to hide, but hunger held her in place, and something else too. Something that might have been the beginning of shame. She approached slowly, her head down. The woman looked up. Recognition flickered across her face. For a moment, neither of them spoke. "Please," Chioma whispered. "I'm so hungry. Could you spare 1 orange?" The woman studied her. Chioma could see herself reflected in those tired eyes, the dirty clothes, the desperate expression, the complete reversal of fortune that was so absolute it seemed impossible. "You don't remember me, do you?" the woman said quietly. "I do," Chioma admitted, her voice breaking. "I remember what I said to you. I remember how cruel I was, and I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." The woman was quiet for a long moment. Then she did something that Chioma would never forget for the rest of her life. She picked up 3 oranges, she peeled them carefully with practiced hands, and she gave them all to Chioma. "Eat," she said simply. Chioma's hands shook as she took the oranges. Tears streamed down her face, mixing with orange juice as she ate. They were the best thing she had ever tasted, not because of the fruit itself, but because they came wrapped in mercy she didn't deserve. "Why?" Chioma asked when she could speak. "After what I said to you, why would you help me?" The woman smiled sadly. "Because I know what it feels like to be hungry. I know what it feels like to be invisible. I know what it feels like when people look at you and see nothing worth their compassion. I would not wish that feeling on anyone, not even someone who hurt me. But I was so terrible to you." "Yes," the woman agreed, you were. But pain is a powerful teacher. I can see that you have been learning." The woman's name was Ngozi. She had 3 children and a husband who worked as a mechanic. They lived in a face-me-I-face-you compound in Ajagunla, where 6 families shared 1 corridor and everyone knew everyone else's struggles because there was no privacy in poverty. Ngozi did something that Chioma still couldn't understand. She took her home. "You cannot sleep on the street," Ngozi said firmly when Chioma tried to refuse. "It is not safe. You will stay with us until you figure out what comes next." The compound was everything Chioma's mansion was not. Cramped, loud, smelling of cooking fires and bodies living too close together. The room Ngozi's family lived in was smaller than Chioma's former closet. 1 room for 5 people. A kerosene stove, sleeping mats rolled against the wall, clothes hanging on ropes strung across the ceiling. But there was something else there too. Something Chioma had never noticed in her mansion. There was life, real life, messy and complicated and beautiful in ways that money could never buy. Ngozi's children stared at Chioma with open curiosity. The oldest daughter, Ada, was 12 years old and helped her mother sell oranges after school. The twin boys, Chidi and Emeka, were 8 and full of energy that had nowhere to go in the small space. "You will sleep here," Ngozi said, gesturing to a mat she had laid out in the corner. "It is not much, but it is something." "Thank you," Chioma whispered, and meant it with an intensity she had never felt when people thanked her. That night, lying on the thin mat, listening to the sounds of the compound settling into sleep, babies crying, couples arguing, generators coughing to life, roosters calling hours before dawn, Chioma cried. She cried for her father. She cried for the life she had lost. But mostly she cried for the person she had been. The cruel, thoughtless, privileged person who had believed that money made her better than other people, that poverty was a choice, that everyone who struggled was somehow lazy or stupid or undeserving of basic human kindness. "I was wrong about everything," she whispered into the darkness. From across the room, Ngozi's voice came soft but clear. "The question is not whether you were wrong, Chioma. The question is what you will do now that you know you were wrong." The next morning, Chioma woke up to the smell of pap being cooked on the kerosene stove. Ngozi was already up, already preparing breakfast for her children before they went to school, already organizing the oranges she would sell that day. "Can I help?" Chioma asked. Ngozi looked surprised. "You want to help?" "I need to do something. I can't just lie here. Chioma struggled to find the words. "I need to be useful. Please, teach me." And so Ngozi taught her. She taught her how to wake before dawn to get the best oranges from the market. She taught her how to arrange them on the tray so they looked appealing. She taught her how to balance the tray on her head, how to walk without dropping it, how to call out prices in a voice that carried but didn't shout. She taught her how to stand in the heat for hours, how to smile at customers even when your feet hurt, how to make change quickly, how to protect your money from thieves, how to calculate profit margins so thin that one bad day meant your children might not eat that night. She taught her what work actually meant. Chioma was terrible at first. The tray fell. The oranges rolled into the gutter. Customers laughed at her awkward attempts to make sales. Other vendors mocked her, recognizing that she wasn't one of them, that she didn't belong in this world of honest struggle. But Chioma kept trying. Her hands, once soft and manicured, developed calluses. Her skin, once protected by expensive creams and air-conditioned cars, darkened under the sun. Her body, once pampered and carefully maintained, grew lean and hard from walking miles every day, from carrying weight, from learning what it meant to survive. And something else changed too, something deeper. She started to see people, really see them, not as background extras in the movie of her life, but as whole human beings with their own stories, their own struggles, their own dreams that were just as valid as hers had ever been. She saw Mama Caro, who sold vegetables and was saving every naira to pay for her son's WAEC exams. She saw Brother Tunde, who pushed a wheelbarrow and sent money home to his village so his younger siblings could go to school. She saw Sister Faith, who sold pure water and was raising her 3 children alone after her husband died. She heard their stories, their hopes, their fears, their small victories and their constant struggles. And she understood finally what her father's money had protected her from knowing. That most people in this world were not lazy. They were not stupid. They were not less deserving of happiness and comfort and opportunity. They were simply born without the advantages she had taken for granted. Born without the safety net of wealth. Born into a system that made it almost impossible to climb out of poverty no matter how hard they worked, no matter how much they sacrificed, no matter how desperately they tried. One evening, after a long day of selling oranges, Chioma sat with Ngozi in the compound, both of them exhausted. "How do you do it?" Chioma asked. "How do you keep going when it's so hard, when there's no end in sight, when every day is just about surviving until tomorrow?" Ngozi smiled, and the smile was tired but genuine. "Because surviving until tomorrow is not a small thing, Chioma. For people like us, waking up in the morning, feeding our children, keeping them in school, teaching them to be good people. That is victory. That is success. We measure our wealth differently than you did before, not in bank accounts, but in moments. A child's laugh, a meal shared with friends, the dignity of honest work. These things cannot be taken from you the way money can be taken." "I had so much money," Chioma said quietly, "and I was miserable. I was empty. I just didn't know it because I was too busy accumulating more things to notice that none of them filled the emptiness." "And now?" Ngozi asked. "Now that you have nothing, are you more empty or less?" Chioma thought about that. "Less," she admitted. "I have less of everything except I don't know how to describe it. Clarity, purpose, humanity." "You have compassion now," Ngozi said simply. "That is what you were missing before. Compassion is what connects us to other people. Without it, you are alone no matter how many people surround you. With it, you are never alone even when you have nothing." Months passed. Chioma became one of the regular vendors in the market. People stopped seeing her as an outsider and started seeing her as one of them. She learned the rhythms of the place, the characters, the unwritten rules that govern this economy of survival. She learned to laugh again. Not the cruel laugh she had aimed at Ngozi that day in traffic, but the real laugh that comes from shared jokes and small absurdities and the resilience of the human spirit. She became friends with the other vendors. They looked out for each other, protected each other, celebrated each other's small victories, and mourned each other's setbacks. When Mama Caro's son passed his WAEC exams, everyone in the market contributed money for a small celebration. Chioma gave what she could, and it felt better than any expensive champagne she had ever bought for herself. When Brother Tunde fell sick and couldn't work, the vendors took turns helping him, bringing him food, making sure his bills were paid until he recovered. Chioma took her turn too, grateful to finally understand what community actually meant. One day, about 6 months after her world had collapsed, Chioma was selling oranges near the traffic stop where she had first mocked Ngozi. She saw a luxury car pull up. A young woman in the back seat scrolling through her phone, wearing designer clothes and an expression of bored entitlement that Chioma recognized because she had worn the same expression for 23 years. A beggar approached the car, an old man thin and weathered by hard times, asking for help in a quiet, dignified voice. The young woman in the car rolled down her window. "Get away from me," she said coldly. "I don't give money to lazy people. Get a job." The old man's face fell. He shuffled away, his dignity stripped by casual cruelty. Chioma felt something break inside her chest. She set down her tray of oranges and walked over to the old man. "Sir," she said gently, "are you hungry?" The old man looked at her with eyes that had seen too much rejection. "Yes," he admitted. Chioma reached into her pocket and pulled out the money she had earned that day. It wasn't much, but it was something. "Here," she said, pressing the bills into his hand. "Please buy yourself some food." The old man stared at the money, then at Chioma, then tears filled his eyes. "God bless you, my daughter, God bless you." As he walked away, Chioma felt Ngozi's hand on her shoulder. She hadn't noticed her approach. "That was your day's earnings," Ngozi said quietly. "I know. You will have to start over tomorrow. I know that too." "Then why did you give it away?" Chioma looked at Nozi, and for the first time in months she smiled with complete peace. Because 6 months ago I was that girl in the car, and I needed someone to show me that there's a better way to live. That money comes and goes, but how we treat people is the only thing that really matters. That old man's dignity is worth more than my day's earnings. His humanity is worth more than my comfort. Nozi hugged her then, right there in the street, and Chioma understood that she had finally found what she had been searching for her entire life without knowing she was searching. She had found her humanity. 2 years passed. Chioma never got her father's wealth back. The mansion remained in other people's hands. The cars were sold. The empire her father had built crumbled into history. But Chioma built something better. Something that couldn't be taken away by creditors or bad luck or the cruel twists of fate. She started small. She saved every naira she could, living even more simply than necessary, eating less so she could save more. When she had enough, she did something that surprised everyone. She didn't try to escape the compound. She didn't try to return to her old life. Instead, she opened a small school in the compound. Just 2 rooms at first, but 2 rooms where children who couldn't afford private school could come and learn. She taught them reading and mathematics. But she also taught them something more important. She taught them that wealth is not measured in money but in character. That privilege is not something to be hoarded but something to be shared. That every person they meet deserves dignity and respect regardless of what that person owns or wears or earns. Nozi helped her. So did Mama Caro and Brother Tunde and Sister Faith and all the other people who had shown Chioma what real community looked like. The school grew slowly. More rooms, more children, more hope. One day, a journalist from one of the Lagos newspapers heard about the school. She came to interview Chioma, curious about the fallen heiress who had chosen to stay in the slums rather than try to claw her way back to wealth. "Why didn't you try to rebuild your father's empire?" the journalist asked. "You could have used your name, your connections, your education to start over. Why did you choose this instead?" Chioma looked around the crowded classroom where 30 children sat on benches, their eyes bright with the kind of hunger that had nothing to do with food and everything to do with knowledge and opportunity. "Because I learned something in my fall that I never learned in my privilege," Chioma said. "I learned that the measure of a life is not what you accumulate but what you give. Not what you own but who you help. Not the size of your mansion but the size of your heart. My father's empire was built on money. I wanted to build something that would outlast money. Something that would change lives in ways that my father's hotels and properties never could." "And what is that?" the journalist asked. "Hope," Chioma said simply. "I am building hope. One child at a time, one day at a time. And that, I have discovered, is worth more than all the money in the world." Years later, when Chioma told her story to her students, she always began the same way. "I was once a person who believed that money made me better than other people," she would say. "I was cruel because I didn't understand suffering. I was heartless because I had never known loss. I was blind because I didn't want to see anything that made me uncomfortable." The children would listen, their faces serious, trying to imagine their teacher as the person she described. "Life taught me the hardest lesson of all," Chioma would continue. "It stripped away everything I thought made me valuable and showed me that real value comes from who you are, not what you own. It took away my wealth and gave me something infinitely more precious. It gave me eyes that could see, a heart that could feel, and hands that could help." "But don't you miss being rich?" a student once asked. Chioma smiled. "I am rich," she said. "Look around you. I have students who love to learn. I have friends who would share their last meal with me. I have neighbors who look out for each other. I have the satisfaction of knowing that my life makes a difference. What more wealth could any person need? She looked at Ngozi, who now helped run the school, and they shared a smile that contained an entire history. The day I mocked your mother in traffic, Chioma said to Ada, Ngozi's daughter, who was now a teacher at the school, was the day I began dying to my old self. And the day your mother showed me mercy I didn't deserve was the day I began to truly live. Sometimes we need to lose everything to discover what actually matters.